Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be giving you guys some stenciling tips as we just released some new layering stencils in Simon Hurley Create, and I want to share a couple different tips to make your life easier when creating with them. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so here are the two Slimline stencil sets that we created. This one is called Bold Blossoms and has 3 different layers in the set, and this one is called Mosaic Florals and has 2 layers. Now, the Bold Blossoms set also has a stamp that coordinates. This is the Bold Blossoms Slimline stamp, so of course if you want to stamp this down and then stencil over top of it, it'll have all of this detail and the coloring. But today I'm going to show you how to use this just by itself to get a really awesome effect as well. So you don't need one or the other to have them both work together, which is really awesome. Now stencils are double-sided, so we wanted to make sure that you know exactly what side to use. So if you can read the words Bold Blossoms and then the number of the layer that it is, you should be good, and that is the right side to use on your card making project. Alright, now usually a slimline card is 3.5 by 8.5 inches. But I'm going to cut down a piece of cardstock to 4 by 9 to work along with these stencils. The reason being is because each one of these stencils is 4 by 9 inches. And so to make it super easy to line up, all I'm going to do is cut the cardstock to the exact same size so that I just have to line this up like this, and then I know each layer is going to line up, and you guys will see how that works. So all I'm going to do is just line it up like this and then tape it down onto all the sides and then go in and do my stenciling. Alright, for this first layer, I'm going to use one of my new colors called Shooting Star. This is a beautiful, bright, super awesome yellow color. So I'm just going to go in here with one of my blending brushes. I like to use these white blending brushes from Gina. And then I'm just going to go in and blend right over top of the stencil. I love how easy this blending is to do, especially if you did have that image stamped down. It would make it really easy to color in rather than having to futz with watercolor or any coloring medium like that. Of course, you could leave this as it is, but since it's quite large openings here, I'm gonna go in with some other colors, starting off with a little bit of Prom Queen, and I'm going to go on the largest flowers and just go right in the center and do a little bit of blending. For this, I'm taking kind of the front end of my brush here because I don't want it to be the whole flower, and just going in and lightly blending that center to get a totally different color in there. And I'm just doing this on the biggest flowers. All right, and for these medium and smaller ones, I'm gonna go in and use a little bit of this new super bright mid-tone orange color called Roar. And I love this one for just getting a little bit of shading in there. And this is just going to add some really easy depth and dimension to this image. Like I said, they're quite large flowers, so going in and adding a little bit of extra blending like this, it doesn't take too much time, but it really gives these flowers some depth and dimension to them. For the direct center of these flowers, I want to add just a tiny bit more detail, so I'm going in with a little bit of Love Struck here on a detail blending tool. And I'm just gonna add that right to the center of some of the larger flowers. And again, just further adding to that depth and dimension to this flower and really bringing it to life with a little bit of color. In order to avoid harsh marks, I tap off to the side a little bit on my craft sheet to get rid of a little bit of that ink and then go onto your surface. And that'll kind of help blend it out really nice and smooth without having too much color on the surface at once. All right, now all I have to do is peel off those pieces of tape, remove my stencil, and we have our first layer all done. Now I'm going to go in with my second layer. You can read that bottom etched area to make sure that you have the correct layer and in the right position. And then I'm going to, again, just tap it down to make sure that it's lined up with the edges, and then grab those same pieces of tape and fold them over, and you'll see here that these leaves line up perfectly with our image. So having it edge to edge is super helpful and time saving. All right, now I'm grabbing another new color. This one is Viper. I really love this, and get it on a blending brush here. Now I'm gonna tap a lot of this color off to the side, and then I'm gonna go right onto the surface and start blending. You're gonna notice I'm getting a lot lighter of a color than this actual ink pad is, and that's what I want for this first layer of coloring. because we want to do a little bit of shading like we did on the last layer. So I'm starting off a lot lighter so I can bring in a little bit more color. I love starting off with a darker color like this and then tapping it off to the side to make it lighter. That way you can kind of really build up the layers to make it darker if you want to, but you can also keep it super nice and light like this. So you've got a lot of versatility with just one ink pad. Now in the last layer we added those several colors with different ink pads, but here I'm just going to get a little bit of a darker shade by going in a little bit more heavy-handed, not wiping it off on the side first, and that's going to give me a much darker blend, and we can of course build our color up as well. And this is a really easy way to add a little bit of shading with the exact same ink pad. Just by going in with a little bit more of a heavy hand, it really helps to add a little bit of depth and shading to it and not have to bring out a bunch of different inks. All right, now again with this layer, gently peel back the tape once we're finished. We can lift that off, and this is really starting to come to life here. Now let's bring in the third layer, check that etched area, make sure it's in that bottom right-hand corner, tap it down to line it up with the sides, and then again, press that tape onto the surface. Now this is another layer of leaves, and the reason why we did these separately is because sometimes when you have so many leaves that are so close together, like this has, you might have some ripping in your stencil if you're not super careful. So we wanted to add it on a different layer so that your stencil stays together and you don't have to worry about that. So I'm just going to go in with the exact same color and do the same thing. It's not meant to be a different color, it's just meant so that you don't kind of rip your stencil. It kind of keeps the quality more intact. All right, doing that same thing. And here's another tip. If you've got really small little areas like these little stems here, sometimes a sponge is gonna have a harder time going into those areas. So a brush is where that really comes in handy and comes to shine. It gets into those details so easily. And then of course, we'll go in with a heavier hand and add our shading just like the last layer that we did. But we're going to remove that layer, and there we have our finished piece. I am so obsessed with the blending of this, and look how easily everything lined up just because we cut it to the exact same size of the stencil and laid each one matching up with all of the edges. So that is a helpful tip, and not every stencil company does that. So I wanted to really make sure it was easy for you guys to make sure everything's lined up, because I know that sometimes it can be difficult and stressful to do. All right, now I'm going in and fussy cutting this out. The 9x4 inch panel was obviously to line it up with the edges, but we do want to cut it down to fit onto our Slimline card. So of course you could just cut it in your guillotine trimmer with rectangle edges, but I'm just going in with my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors, which are really great because they spring back out at you so your hand won't get tired. And I'm just going to go in here and fussy cut this out, leaving a little bit of a white border all the way around the image. It's pretty easy to do because there's not a ton of little tiny details, and I'm just going to fussy cut this out. All right, to make a background, I'm going in on a piece of my stark white cardstock that I have cut down and scored to be a Slimline card base, which is 3.5 inches by 8.5 inches. And then to color this, to make it a piece of colored cardstock, here's a really easy life hack. I don't keep too much colored cardstock on hand, and so when I need a piece that exactly matches my project, like this Viper color, I'm gonna go in with my blending brush and just blend right around the edge. It doesn't take too much ink because we're just blending over the edges, and then it perfectly matches the color of my project too, which is super nice. All right, I've added it onto that card base now. I love that color as a background, and I'm gonna go in with the lovely Lantanas and use, I think, the I appreciate you so much sentiment. I love these kind of encouraging sentiments, and this one has a great font to it. All right, so I'm just gonna ink that up with some black ink, and then I will stamp it down onto my stark white cardstock. And then I always like to go in and heat emboss with a little bit of my clear embossing powder. And then I'm gonna heat set this until it's nice and clear and shiny. And that finishes off this card. It's pretty simple. I love how easy it was to line up this stencil, and that stencil is really the star of the show, which is just so stunning. And of course, if you want to stamp down the detail layer with bold blossoms, you totally could as well, but I love it by itself too. It's just Beautiful. All right, let's move on to the next card using the Mosaic Floral Stencil and share a few more of my stenciling tips. So this one has 2 different layers. It doesn't have a stamp set to coordinate, but it still is just absolutely stunning. So I'm gonna start off with, again, it has them etched in the corner. This is the first layer. So I've got another piece of cardstock cut down to 4 by 9 inches. And this time, instead of messing around with tape, I thought I would pull out the Make Art Station, because this is one of the really awesome uses of it, is just going in with my magnets, sticking them down, and that's going to take care of holding it in place for me, which is really awesome. And again, I just have it lined up so that the paper and the stencil are kind of lined up exactly on the edges. All right, now it's time to do some blending, and let me share one of my favorite color combinations with you guys. So starting off with a little bit of Crown Me, which is that purple right in the center of these flowers. And when I want lots of color at once and I want it to be super bold and saturated, that's when I'll go in with these foam blenders and start out there. So going right in the center with that really bold and rich purple. And then I'm going to bring in the new color, Love Struck, which is this beautiful kind of berry red color. It's absolutely stunning. I'm gonna go in again with my foam blender, kind of turning it on its side here so I can get a smaller area of blending there, and just blend this right around that purple color for just look how beautiful that blends together. I just love it. It's a stunning blend. Then we'll bring in a little bit of Roar, which is that bright orange color. And again, this is the really awesome part about the Make Art Station, is I'm not having to mess around with any tape or anything. My stencil is not shifting, which is really awesome news. And I just love that, because sometimes the tape can be a little bit finicky, especially on stencils where you kind of have to get a couple different layers out. You don't always want to mess around with the tape. All right, then to finish it off, again, I'm using this super bright yellow called Shooting Star. I absolutely love this one because it like brightens any area up. So I'm gonna go in with a little bit of Shooting Star and bring it into that orange too to really lighten and brighten that as well. When you layer yellow on top of other colors, you're just going to really bring a nice brightness and saturation to that. So look at that amazing blend. I love all 4 of these colors together. All right, so once we're done with this, I'm going to really easily remove my magnets like that, lift that off, and honestly, I designed this stencil so that you can just stop here if you want to. You can, of course, fill it in on other sides with more of these flowers or cut this out and make just a regular A2 size card, but there is also this really awesome other layer which creates this almost mosaic looking background. So then to line it up again, make sure that the Mosaic Florals reads in the corner, and then just make sure that all of the edges are lined up, and you're going to be able to really easily line everything up, magnet it down, and we can get started on our blending. All right, to contrast those flowers, I'm gonna go in with some cool colors. So bring in some blues. I'm gonna start off with a little bit of my Clear Skies color, and this time you'll notice I've switched over to a blending brush. That's because this is a really great tip. When you're going into a bunch of tiny little areas like this, a blending brush is going to be your best friend, because all of these little tiny bristles will get into all of those little smaller details and get really nice fine details. Sometimes the sponges, they're really great, don't get me wrong, and I love them for applying really dark color and make it really vibrant and saturated, but at the same time, sometimes they miss all of those different details. So that's where bringing in this brush is going to be really helpful and handy for these tiny little areas on this stencil. All right, then of course to add some depth and dimension, we're going in with a couple different blues. So I'm going to bring in No Diving next, which is just this like saturated, rich, just true blue color. I absolutely love how that looks and how it blends together with Clear Skies. So just going in and adding that in a few different sections, kind of randomly here. It's no rhyme or reason, really. I love these kind of mosaic backgrounds, and I was so inspired by them. And then last but not least, we're gonna go in with Midnight Snack and just darken up some of the areas on the stencil with this really nice kind of midnight navy color. All right, once that's done, again, remove the magnets off the surface. That was super easy. And then when we lift that off, look at how amazing that background looks. I'm absolutely in love with this stencil, and lining it up was made so easy by just layering it with the edges again. I love how this turned out with that blending in the end. All right, I just put that sentiment right onto the center of the card, and that finishes it off really nicely. I love that those flowers just really stand out on their own to create this beautiful slimline blended card, and how that layering stencil lines up with all of those tiny little pieces of mosaics is super cool. Alright guys, I hope you really enjoyed all of today's tips for lining up my Simon Hurley Create layering stencils super easily, and also just kind of streamlining the process with a couple of different tools and tips. Alright guys, if you enjoyed it, please give it a big thumbs up, leave a comment down below letting me know which card was your favorite, and also click that subscribe button so you never miss more videos like this one from me. Alright guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all soon. Bye!